Don't let that sunshine fool you. When I took my kids to school this morning, it was minus 31 degrees. That's just obscene. So hopefully you're nice and warm and cozy and ready to watch my next video in the top 60 board game series. Today we'll be looking at numbers 40 through 31. Number 40 is Jäger und Sammler, which is German for hunter and gatherer. It was designed by famed game designer Rainer Knizia and was published by Amigo Spiel. I give this game a rating of 7.5 out of 10. My wife, I don't think has played this. I don't see it as being her style really, but I've been playing it with my kids lately and they've been enjoying it. The number of players stated on the box is 2 to 4, and as far as the ideal number of players goes, 2 to 4 definitely works. It's a pretty wide open game at 2, not quite as competitive, but it's definitely still fun. The playtime listed on the box is 45 minutes, which is a pretty realistic playtime. The complexity, I say, is 3 out of 10. It really is dead simple, and as I said, I've been playing with my 7 and 8-year-old kids. Although despite the simplicity, it does torture your brain with a lot of different options. With this title, Dr. Knizia obviously got hold of Hey, That's My Fish, and thought, hey, I could probably turn this into a bigger game with more interesting options. And lo, thus was born the Game of Mammoths. Over 2 seasons, players are attempting to outmaneuver each other and grab the most valuable stuff on a gradually disappearing board. Food provides fixed point values, but just as in real life, when collecting goods such as animal skulls, having more of them increases the value of each individual one. And interestingly, the number of supply packs a player is able to place in the winter camps dictates the number of workers they'll have available to them for the winter season. If you want to know more about this one, I talked about it recently in my Blue Lagoon video, which I'll link at the end of this video. Number 39 is Perry Roden, The Cosmic League. It was designed by Heinrich Glumpler and was published by Cosmos. My rating of this game is 7.5 out of 10, and my wife has enjoyed this one quite a lot with me over the years. The number of players stated on the box is 2 players. It is strictly a 2-player game, and while I have downloaded and printed the material required to play a 3-player game variant, I've never actually tried it. The playtime listed on the box is 30 minutes, which is pretty realistic. It might run a tad longer. The complexity I put at 3 out of 10. It's a quick and easy game. This game was released back in 2007, and since I had no idea who Perry Roden was, I didn't purchase it until I started to hear good things about the gameplay. Turns out it's a basic 2-player pick up and deliver game where players are loading their spaceships with goods and passengers and bringing them to the planets that require them. Just as in real life, the game is a race to be the first to reach a certain amount of money. Players can upgrade their spaceships with various technologies, but the twist is that in order to do so, they have to spend money, which is also their victory points. So they have to weigh whether or not the money-making efficiency provided by a new technology will more than make up for the fact that purchasing the tech will get them further from the money level that is required to win the game. It makes for some interesting decisions, and my wife and I have gotten a lot of enjoyment from this little game over the past 11 or 12 years. One final interesting note, this is one of I think 2 games in my collection that utilizes a roll and move mechanism, which is wildly unpopular for good reasons nowadays, yet it actually works well within the structure of this game. Number 38 is Viticulture, which comes in this nice little sleeved box here. And it weighs a ton because there's so much great goodness in this box. It was designed by Jamie Stegmaier and Alan Stone, and it was published by Stonemaier Games. This is the game that introduced the amazing Jamie and Stonemaier games to the world. I have the second Kickstarter edition here. I had kickstarted the original Viticulture back in 2012, but when they reworked it, came out with the second edition, and then added the Tuscany expansion, I sold my original copy and went all in on all the new stuff in 2014. As a result, I own the complete original edition of the Tuscany expansion, as well as more visitors and some of the Kickstarter promotional cards. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10, and my wife really enjoys this one a lot as well. The number of players stated on the box is 2 to 6. I say the ideal number is more like 2 to 4. With 6, the game length can really become slightly problematic. Speaking of which, the playtime on the box is 45 to 90 minutes. I would say realistically you're looking at closer to 2 hours, unless maybe you're playing with only 2 or 3 players. I put the complexity at 6 out of 10, taking into account all the expansion stuff and the many interlocking mechanisms that players must navigate in order to get from planting a vine, to harvesting the grapes, to making the wine, to fulfilling wine orders. But for my money, this is the definitive worker placement game, though to be fair, it's had the benefit of a few additions over several years to refine the game and work out its earlier issues. It has this great theme of starting up a vineyard, and everything about the mechanisms works really well toward getting an efficient wine-producing engine up and running. And just as in real life, don't forget to age your grapes so that you can use them to produce a pre-aged wine. I did a full playthrough of the game with the solo rules, which I can link to at the end of this video. Number 37 is Nexus Ops, not to be confused with Spectre Ops, which will be coming later in a future video. This one was designed by Charlie Catino, who also designed the Xena Warrior Princess CCG, and Stephen Kimball. It was originally published by Avalon Hill, but I sold that edition and picked up this Fantasy Flight Games edition when it was released in 2012. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10. Some years back my wife gave it a rating of 8 out of 10, though I'm not sure if she's still rated quite that highly. It's been quite a while since we've played it. The number of players listed on the box is 2 to 4, and it does work well at all player counts from 2 to 4. The playtime listed is 45 to 60 minutes. I'm definitely looking at the higher end of that range for a realistic playtime, about an hour I would say. And the complexity I put at 3 out of 10. It is just a brilliantly streamlined game. And just to show you how tastes can change over time, my favorite board game genre used to be 4X games, which are those big games of expansion and conquest such as Axis and Allies. But nowadays I have no real interest in that genre or in games with a large amount of conflict in general. However, Nexus Ops strips out every single ounce of excess bloat from those typically large and long playing beasts and leaves the leanest, fastest, furiousest 4X experience possible. So while I haven't gotten it to the table in some years now, I would still gladly play it any day. I'll have to try it with my kids sometime soon. And while this opinion will cause the OG Avalon Hill Nexus Opsers to harumph in indignation, I really like what Fantasy Flight did with this newer edition, and I do prefer the new edition. Because let's face it, in real life, lava leapers are complex, multifaceted creatures, so I'm really happy about all the alternate ways and game variants that have been provided in the newer version of Nexus Ops. Number 36 is Gentlemen Thieves. This one was designed by Charles Chevalier, Catherine Dumas, and Pascal Pellemont. It was published by Studio Bombix. I rate the game 7.5 out of 10, and I think my wife is fairly lukewarm on this particular one. The number of players stated on the box is 2 to 5. Ideally, though, I think you would want 4 to 5 players for the best experience. The listed playtime is 45 minutes, which is accurate. It's about a 45-minute game. The complexity I put at 3 out of 10, yet another delightfully simple game. As with Perry Rodin, this is another game based on a literary character named Arsène Lupin, with whom I am unfamiliar. Apparently, he is a French gentleman burglar who is, by nature, somewhat of a cross between Sherlock Holmes and Robin Hood. And I feel like I'm the only one who actually knows about this game, because I never see it anywhere or even hear anyone talking about it. It's a very intriguing and tense game of hidden identities, sneaky play, bluffing, deduction, shifting alliances, and shared rewards, but making sure you end up with the best rewards. Players are cat burglars who, just as in real life, must team up with their fellow thieves in order to pull off big heists. However, since players' identities remain hidden, you're never quite sure who you're teaming up with, as the members of these groups are constantly changing with each heist. Since there's not much incentive to keep your identity hidden, I play with a variant where, before final scores are tallied, players attempt to guess the identities of their fellow burglars and receive bonus points for doing so correctly, as well as receiving points for other players not guessing their identity correctly. With the proper motivation to play sneakily, the game is much more interesting, and overall is good for a laugh and a bit of fun. And let's just keep working down this shelf, because number 35 is Biblios. This was designed by Steve Finn and was published by Yellow. This is the newer edition of the game. I did have the earlier version when it was called Scripts and Scribes and came in a repurposed VCR box and was published by Dr. Finn's Games, but obviously the components in this edition are significantly better. The number of players listed is 2 to 4. I say that the ideal number is 3 or 4. There are plenty of people who insist the game works great with 2, and even some who say that it's at its best with 2, but personally I just can't see that. I'd rather have 3 or 4 with Biblios. The play time listed is 30 minutes, which is pretty accurate. It's even a bit quicker than that if you're familiar with the game. And the complexity, yet again, I put at 3 out of 10. This is another game about books, though extremely loosely so in this case. Biblios is played in 2 distinct halves, with the first half being sort of like a drafting phase, but players are secretly assigning cards to each other. Then the second half is an auction phase, leading up to the final reveal of the cards and the tally of the scores. There's even a bit of a deduction element in the fact that, just as in real life, the church affects the values of different book types. Players must very carefully watch exactly how their fellow book collectors are manipulating the scoring categories to get clues as to what they are focusing on and what they are ignoring. This is such a brilliant filler level game, and while it shouldn't be a funny game, due to the secrecy of the gameplay, I've seen a lot of laughs when all the cards are revealed at the end of the game. Number 34 is Expedition Northwest Passage. It was designed by Yves Torigny and was published by Matago. I rate this game 8 out of 10. That's right, we're up to the 8s now. My wife has only played the game with me once, and I feel like she'd give it a bit of a middling rating. The number of players stated on the box is 2 to 4, and I say that the ideal number of players is 2 or 4. With 3 players, you'll often end up with a situation where 2 players are helping each other carve out a path to the Northwest Passage, while the other player is off struggling on their own. The playtime listed on the box is an hour, though I would say a more realistic playtime is closer to 1.5 hours. I put the complexity at about 5 out of 10. A combination of the tough gameplay decisions and the rules of the game work to make it about a medium weight game. This is one of the more interestingly thematic Euro-style games I own, and there's a lot packed into it. There's exploration and tile placement as the map is discovered and built, because just as in real life, the person who is exploring can decide how the landscape is formed. There's a race game in that being the first to reach the Northwest Passage gives a huge victory point reward. There's a push your luck element in that players must also make it back to Greenland before the end of the game to avoid negative victory point penalties, and it's all done using an action point system. It also has one of the coolest mechanisms I've seen in any game, which is the rotating sun that, as the seasons change, causes more and more of the map to freeze up and forces players to eventually park their ships and get some of their crew out on the ice on the sleds. But then, as the seasons change again and the ice begins to melt, they need to be able to get back to the ships before they end up stranded out on an ice floe. It's an extremely clever design that I don't get to play nearly often enough. Oh, and look what's right next to it. It's my number 33, which is K2. This was designed by Adam Kaluza and published by Common Man Games. I own the Broad Peak expansion as well as the Avalanche expansion, and I was excited to learn that they've just released another expansion called Lotzi. I'm just waiting for it to show up here in Canada. My rating is 8 out of 10. I don't know if my wife ever really took to this game very much, but the number of players listed is 1 to 5. There is a solo mode, although I would say the ideal number of players for a competitive experience would be 3 or 4. The listed playtime on the box is 1 hour, which is pretty accurate. It's a pretty fast playing game, and I'm back to giving a 3 out of 10 complexity rating for this one. It seems like it should be a bit higher, but it's really surprisingly simple. It was unintentional, yet highly appropriate, that a game about climbing K2 ended up immediately above Expedition Northwest Passage in this list, because, just like Expedition, it's another game whose subject matter is the harshest of cold weather climates, with weather being an ever-changing factor in the game. The primary mechanism involves using action points. It has a victory point-based winning condition, but is primarily a race game with a very strong push-your-luck element, and it has a strongly integrated theme. K2 is much simpler than Expedition Northwest Passage, yet it does an even better job of integrating the theme. In fact, I bet you can't find even one other Euro-style game that so perfectly captures its theme with such a simple rule set. It shouldn't be too surprising that this is the case, given that K2 was actually designed by a real mountaineer. Also, given that the goal is to get both your climbers as high as possible on the mountain without them dying, because just as in real life, you don't get points for a dead climber, the finishes are always nail-bitingly tense, with climbers clinging to the last threads of life as the final turns come to a close. It's always such a tension-filled, exciting experience. This is another game that I did a solo playthrough for, and I'll link that video at the end of this one. Number 32 is Oceanos. This one was designed by famous game designer Antoine Bauza, and it was published by Yellow. I give the game a rating of 8 out of 10, and it's been a hit with my wife and other friends as well. The number of players stated on the box is 2 to 5. I say that the ideal number of players is 3 to 5 because of the way the card drafting works. The playtime listed on the box is 30 minutes. That's a little optimistic. I would say realistically is more like 45 minutes. And the complexity I put at 3 out of 10, which seems to be a real sweet spot for me these days. From my very first play, I was absolutely charmed by this card drafting / tableau building game that even incorporates technological upgrades. The artwork is amazing. Just look at this baby kraken. Oh, little cracky. And I love that each player has a large submarine tile with puzzle-like sections that can be swapped out as players upgrade different parts of the sub. Players are attempting to build the best ocean tableau, but just as in real life, if they get too greedy, they'll draw the attention of the Kraken, which, as you can imagine, is never a good thing. It's a really unique game with some very neat design elements that, most importantly, is a lot of fun. The beautiful artwork and lavish production values of the components bring a player in, and then the gameplay that's chock full of tough decisions keeps them coming back for more. Number 31 is Telestrations After Dark. The design... Why are you looking at me like that? Yeah, I got the After Dark edition. Drawing naughty pictures is way more fun than drawing normal pictures. It's just a fact. Anyways, this game has no credited designer, probably because, much like Balderdash arose out of the popular parlor game Dictionary that people have been playing at home for years, this game was based on the do-it-yourself-at-home game called Eat Poop You Cat. This was published by USAopoly. As I said, I do have the After Dark edition. I also have the original edition of the game in the box, so I have both games in here. I rate the game 8 out of 10, and my wife is right there with me. She thinks it's hilarious and a lot of fun. The number of players listed on the box is 4 to 8, which I would say is the perfect number to have here. Because I have both editions, I do have enough components to play with 16 people, but capping it at 8 seems like a much more reasonable option. It would be tough to manage 16 players at once with this one. There's no playtime listed on the box, but the game page for this on BoardGameGeek.com shows a playtime of 30 minutes. Realistically, I think you can knock out a game in 15 minutes, though the 30-minute playtime makes much more sense in the context of the question, how can you stop at just one game? The complexity I put at 1 out of 10, as long as you can at least draw a stick figure, you should be good to go. Telestrations is more a hilarious activity than an actual game. I don't even know what sort of scorekeeping mechanism they've shoehorned into here because I don't use it. If anything, keeping score would detract from the experience. Players simply pass around these drawing pads where they start by drawing a picture based on a word or phrase, then write a word or phrase to describe their neighbor's picture, then draw a picture based on those words, and so on until the final phrase or picture is revealed, at which point, just as in real life, players can laugh at their inability to convey simple messages. It's much like a game of telephone in written and illustrated form, and it's straight up one of our favorite party games. And with that, we're halfway through the top 60. I'm really happy that people have been enjoying this particular series and are eager for me to get through it. I just ask for patience because making videos of decent quality is nothing if not incredibly time-consuming. So please bear with me, I will get through it, and if you're looking for something to do in the meantime, how about playing a game? Hey, it's Josh. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really proud of the work that I put into making this video, and it would mean the world to me if you would take the time to share it with one or two people that you think might enjoy it as well. Cheers. With this title, we'll get them further from the money level that is required to win the game. Oh my gosh, I'm putting my clipboard in front. Blah, 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 blah. In order to get... or in games with a large amount of conflict in general. It's minus 31 outside, but it's baking in here. And the kind of work together to make it about a medium. The artwork is amazing. Just look at the baby kraken. What baby kraken? Here, cracky, cracky, cracky. There you are. There you are. Oh, little cracky. Okay, back on track. Kraken! From my very first play, I was absolutely charmed. Number 31 is Telestrations After Dark. Which is probably because, much like Balderdash arose out of the popular parlor game Dictionary that people have been playing for years and years in their homes. What is happening here? Taking all the games off my shelf. But the listing for this game on the Board Game Geek